You are listening to the weekly wrap up episode 2 for the week March 19 to March 25, presented by Pod Club of I Am Jammu, bringing you all you need to know from all the things that have happened. Starting with the Parliament, the Lok Sabha passed the Finance Bill 2023 with 64 official amendments, including the one that seeks withdrawal of long term tax benefits on certain categories of debt mutual funds, and another for setting up the GST Appellate Tribunal. The finance bill that gives effect to tax proposals for fiscal year starting April 1 was passed without a discussion amidst ruckus by opposition members. This all happened in the backdrop of Rahul Gandhi being disqualified as member of Lok Sabha after he was convicted in a defamation suit by District Court of Surat. Almost all opposition parties have come in his support. Along with the discussion levels in Parliament, India's current account deficit is likely to have reduced in the final quarter of 2022 from a 9-year high in July-September as the goods trap moderated and net services exports rose. The median forecast of 22 economists polled March 16 to 23 showed a current account deficit of $23 billion in October to December 2022, or 2.7 of GDP. Forecasts range from $15 to $28 billion, or 2 to 3.2% of GDP. In July-September, the gap was $36.4 billion. Although current account deficit would be low, tensions were high in Punjab this week as state police upped the ante against separatist leader Amritpal and his aides. Even though Amritpal managed to escape, resulting in him being declared fugitive, more than 100 of his aides were arrested. The internet was shut down in Punjab for 4 days with little to no violence reported in the state, although it sparked a protest in UK in front of Indian consulate. This week, Earth decided to quake a little, as almost the entire northern India on Tuesday night felt strong tremors of an earthquake that occurred in northeastern Afghanistan, about 1,000 km of north of New Delhi. The US Geological Survey measured the earthquake to be 6.5 in magnitude and located about 300 km northwest of Kabul, towards the border with Tajikistan. Northeastern Afghanistan, where the Hindu Kush ranges are located, is an earthquake-prone area which routinely experiences quakes of magnitude more than 6. Supreme Court continues to show who is the boss as Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud reiterated his stance on sealed cover submissions before the Supreme Court. A bench comprising Justice Chandrachud and Justices Narasimha and J.B. Pardiwala refused to accept a sealed cover note by the centre on its views regarding the payment of one rank, one pension arrears to ex-service personnel. This practice is fundamentally contrary to the basic process of justice, the bench said. Sealed covers are a practice followed in the Supreme Court of seeking information from government agencies in sealed envelopes that can only be seen by the judges. Moving to the international news, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, on his visit to India, announced an expensive new plan for an open and free Indo-Pacific, promising billions of dollars in investment to help economies across the region in everything from industry to disaster prevention. Kishida pledged $75 billion to Indo-Pacific by 2030 through private investments and yen loans, and ramping up of aid through official government assistance and grants. The money flow continued in South Asia as the IMF Executive Board on Monday approved a nearly $3 billion bailout for Sri Lanka, and the country's presidency said the program will enable it to access up to $7 billion in overall funding. The decision will allow an immediate disbursement of about $333 million. The IMF expects this to spur financial support from other partners, potentially helping Sri Lanka emerge from its worst financial crisis in over 7 decades. Moving to the sports world, in what will be India's best ever showing at a Women's Boxing World Championships, 4 Indians have entered the gold medal round of the ongoing tournament in New Delhi. Neetu Gangas, Nikhat Zerine, Lavlina Borgohain and Sweetie Bura all won their semi-final bouts on Thursday at the Indira Gandhi Indoor Stadium and will be fighting in the final on Saturday and Sunday. Women's sports continue to dominate news as Women Premier League is set to conclude its highly successful inaugural season on Sunday with the final between Delhi Capitals and Mumbai Indians at a sold-out Brabant Stadium in Mumbai. The tournament was able to pull huge crowds into the stadium along with more than expected TV ratings. Diving into the business world, Union Bank of Switzerland agreed to buy rival Swiss bank Credit Suisse for 3 billion Swiss francs, which are $3.23 billion in stock, and agreed to assume up to $5.4 billion in losses. In a shotgun merger engineered by Swiss authorities to avoid more market-shaking turmoil in global banking, the deal includes $108 billion in liquidity assistance for UBS and Credit Suisse from the Swiss Central Bank. To enable UBS to take over Credit Suisse, the federal government is providing a loss guarantee of maximum of 9 billion Swiss francs as a clearly defined part of the portfolio. Are you troubled by internet speeds? No worries, as Airtel on Friday announced a big addition of 235 cities to its 5G network, spreading the reach of its 5th generation service to 500 cities and trumping its rival Reliance Jio, which has its 5G services live in 406 cities. Earlier this week, Airtel had said that its 5G Plus service was available in 265 cities, but on Friday they claimed they have already covered 500 cities and are adding 30 to 40 cities every single day. 5G not enough? Wait for 6G, as the government has launched the Bharat 6G project, which visualizes a focused initiative for the next gen tech in India, and the official 6G testbed project to allow research on new network technologies. India is currently the second largest telecom market globally with 1.2 billion digital subscribers.
Thanks, Varun, for the weekly wrap up, and we will be covering the weekly special case study this time. Last time we covered the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and there is the US context of banking, and this time it is going to be Indian. And we are going to cover how are things going with the Indian banks. Before going into much of a detail, we will be understanding how a bank works. See, the bank make money. It is very easy to understand. They make money from people like us. They take money from us and they pay us a small amount of interest in return. Then they lend out most of these deposits to other people and earn a higher interest rate. The margin difference between these deposit rate and the loan rate is the margin, and this is how they make a good amount of money. But not all the money is given out in the form of loans. They put some money aside just in case something goes wrong, and the rest is used by things like government bonds, and it's pretty safe investment that might not bring in a lot of money, but they can sell these bonds quickly if they need to. Things can go wrong. People who borrowed money might not pay it back, or the investments that the bank has made might be making losses. So at that time they will have to sell those bonds, and people will get scared when they see this happening. They will be running to the bank and they will quickly withdraw their money, and this is called a bank run. And the money the banks have set aside for emergency will have to be used. They might also have to sell any bonds they own. Now this could be a bit of a problem depending on how the economy is doing, because bonds aren't all wired the same way. The price of a bond goes in opposite direction of its yield, which is another word for returns. And in time like now, when central banks are trying to keep a check on the inflation by raising the interest rates, this hurts all the bonds that the banks invest in. How are Indian banks set up? Let's talk about the Indian banks and possibility of a bank run, which happens with the US banks usually, and which happened this time with the Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse. Because what happened in those banks were the startups and wealthy people they serve tend to do what the people of their kind tend to do. They quickly pull out their money, and which puts pressure on the bank. But if you look at the Indian banks, most of the investments they have are from the people like us, common man. Basically, people like you and me put in more than 60% of the money of what banks have, and this is what we call the sticky money. It doesn't have as many as bouts of sadness. Sure, people will still freak out, but experts say there's less chance of this happening. Okay, the deposits look good, but what about the investments? Isn't it bad for the Indian banks when the interest rates go up? Not quite. It's actually good thing at first. Yes, this sounds a little confusing since we've been talking about how banks lose money when the interest rates go up, but it is still true. Let's just talk about how a bank keeps their money in form of bonds. There are three types of things. First is held for trade, available for sales, and held to maturity. Let's pay attention to HFT, AFS, and first, HFT is when the bank buys bonds to bet on how interest rate will change, and AFS is when they buy the bonds for safety, knowing that they can sell them whenever they need to. The RBI wants banks to figure out what these bonds are worth on the market. HTM means that when a bank buys a bond, it has no plans to sell it. Over 75% of India's bond investments are in HTM segment, except for Kotak Mahindra Bank, which has only 45% of its bonds in HTM segment. By holding it onto the HTM bonds until they mature, banks can show that they can avoid showing the temporary losses. If HTM has to be marked to market, it won't be the end of the world for banks. As a shock absorber, banks put some money they make from AFS and HFT sales into an investment fluctuation reserve. Over 60% of the deposits are given out as loans, and when interest rates go up, banks quickly change the rates they charge for loans, because banks take their time to raise deposit rates, and there's a delay between loan rates and deposit rates. These banks this gives the banks a bigger profit margin. On the other hand, they don't quickly raise the rates of deposits. They don't hurry because they don't want to give us a higher interest rate. They want to make money while it's good. So there's a delay between loan rates and deposit rates, and the extra cash ends up in the bank's margins. For example, the net interest margin for ICICI Bank went from 4% in the June of 2022 to 4.7% in the December of 2022. Kotak Mahindra's NIM jumped from 4.9% to 5.5%, and for State Bank of India, it was from 3.2 to 3.7%, which is a substantial amount. Now, for ending this podcast, we will be inviting the book club of IIM Jammu to recite a poem, and we have Prashant with us. Over to you.
Hello listeners, this is Prashant from the book club, and today we are collaborating with the podcast club for recitation of a beautiful poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had really warned them about just the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no steps had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you so much.